For years, the speculators were flipping condos in Toronto and Vancouver and making a fortune. The prices kept going up and the investors thought they couldn't lose. But now, well, the party is over and it left speculators stuck with condos they can't even buy or sell. Some of them have to declare bankruptcy. This pre-sale condo crash has left nothing but carnage in its way. I already talked about the struggles the developers are facing, the nightmare for long-term investors, for the buyers and the sellers. But in today's video, we will focus on speculators and talk about how they're getting completely wiped out. First, let's quickly talk about the difference between long-term investors and speculators, because a lot of times these two terms are used interchangeably, but in my opinion, there is a pretty big difference between the two. The long-term investor usually focuses on long-term. They buy condos or they buy homes and they rent them out for a long period of time. They have a tenant or tenants living in their units, and usually after several years, maybe decades, they cash out on their investments. As opposed to speculators, they're looking for a quick flip. They're never really looking to rent out their condos. Sometimes it's in a form of a fixer-upper. Other times it's in a form of contract assignments. And speculation in real estate is nothing new. The most recent example of speculation gone wrong is the scandal of 2016, the shadow flipping, as it was called. I was working as a real estate agent at that time, and I remember this was a huge deal. To recap exactly what happened, essentially the real estate prices started going up at a very rapid pace. And a lot of speculators figured out a loophole where they could lock in some properties in the long-term contracts. So they would say, we will buy your house for, let's say, $1.3 million, but we will complete in 6 months. Then in the meantime, while the 6 months was happening, they would try to resell this contract. So they would never actually complete on the property. They would never have the title transferred to their name. They would simply try to assign it to a different buyer. And because the real estate prices were going up so quickly, they were able to make hundreds of thousands of dollars in some cases. This actually led to a pretty big scandal in the real estate industry. It also left a lot of real estate agents without real estate license and with some pretty hefty penalties. On top of that, the BC government had to step in and ban this assignment practice. Now, of course, it's a lot harder to do something like that. You have to give a lot of disclosures to the seller, and any profits made from the assignments will go towards the original seller. This wasn't the case in 2016, and a lot of speculators took advantage. Once shadow flipping got banned, speculators started focusing on pre-sale condo assignments because this industry was somewhat unregulated. The developers wrote their own contracts, and in their contracts, they usually allowed for an assignment. Now, the developer had to give a permission to the buyer to assign the contract, but at the same time, they would charge the fee for assignment. So in either way, the developer was winning. If the contract got assigned, well, they got a fee. And on top of that, the original purchaser, the purchaser that wanted to assign their contract, they still had to stay on a contract as a guarantor. So in case this future purchaser, the one that got contract assigned to them, did not complete, the original buyer had to complete. So this was a win-win situation for developers, and they were making a lot of money this way. On top of that, this was sort of a promise to a lot of speculators to get into this whole real estate speculation, because it seemed like, well, the developers are allowing you to do it, and it was this sort of loophole in a system that people thought they could take advantage of. With interest rates being at all-time lows in 2020, 2021, and parts of 2022, this encouraged a lot of speculators to get into the market. It seemed like you were losing money if you didn't buy one of these condos with the intent to flip it. Well, fast forward to today, and a lot of these speculators are actually getting wiped out and even declaring bankruptcies. There's this excellent article in Maclean's magazine that talks about a story of a Montreal man who bought a condo in 2022. He made a 10% deposit on an $855,000 pre-sale condo with the intent to flip it. He never intended to actually live in this unit. It was only pure speculation. He paid $85,000 deposit, and the completion date was supposed to be late 2024. When this man purchased the condo in 2022, the average condo price in Toronto was $808,000. However, now, when the time came to closing, the average price for a condo in Toronto has dropped by nearly $100,000 to $696,000. So at the time of closing, this buyer had no chance of closing because they didn't even try to get a mortgage. They weren't planning to get a mortgage. They couldn't qualify for a mortgage, and they had to walk away from the deposit. But this is where the story gets even worse for this specific buyer, because not only did they lose $85,000 deposit, this man has also been sued for $860,000 in damages by the developer. The developer eventually resold this condo for $420,000. Just to remind you, this buyer originally bought it for $855,000 just 2 years prior. Now it's sold for less than half of that price. And on top of that, this man got sued for $800,000 plus in damages because of the interest rates, because of legal fees, and the breach of contract. Now, the buyer, of course, will try to argue against this. He will probably sue his realtor, and there's probably going to be an ongoing legal battle. But the developer can afford to go on years in this legal battle. The buyer, on the other hand, cannot and is likely to declare bankruptcy because, of course, these things are extremely expensive. So on top of losing the entire life savings, this man is also on a hook for a lot more money, and he has a pending bankruptcy proceedings hanging over his head. This is a very extreme example of a situation that can happen, but unfortunately, it's not a unique situation. We have seen similar reports across Vancouver and Toronto because the pre-sale condo prices have really dropped since their highs in 2022. According to some reports, in Toronto, the prices have dropped by about 16.5%. and in Vancouver by about 9%, but that is dependent on the region. Surrey Central, some Brentwood buildings have dropped even more. I think in the coming months we will see more and more of similar stories arising because a lot of the buildings have not come to the completion stages yet. They're only getting there now, fall 2025 and spring 2026. So the fallout from all of this is just beginning. And in the past, when I made several videos about talking about developer struggles, I was talking about how buyers are walking away from their deposits. And a lot of people in the comment section were asking, how is that possible? Wouldn't they get sued for damages? Well, yes, that's exactly what could happen. It doesn't happen in every situation, but a lot of times it does happen. And in my opinion, moving forward, we might see more of it happening because the prices will drop even further as a lot more of these units come online without potential buyers. So that is a huge lesson to learn for a lot of potential pre-sale buyers. If you cannot complete on your unit, not only can you be losing your deposit, but you could also be sued for damages. And in some cases, these are life-changing amounts. Imagine being sued for almost $1 million. On top of that, when the developer gets the condo back, when you walk away from your deposit, they will try to resell this condo to somebody else. Now, in this situation, it's not like a foreclosure proceeding where they have a legal right to try to get the maximum amount possible, and they have to demonstrate that in court. In Canada, foreclosures are very different to United States. In this case, the developer will just try to get whatever price they can, and they're not really encouraged to get the most money possible because they know they can always sue the previous buyer for a difference and likely win in court. So for them, when they get, let's say, 20 units in a building that are not getting completed on, well, all of a sudden they have to sell 20 units, and they don't really care as much about what type of price they get for these units. Again, I'm making some general statements here, but overall, that's exactly what happened with this specific buyer in Toronto. The other problem that we see arising from this situation is the fact that a lot of these units are not exactly tailored at the end user. They're investment type properties. A lot of these properties come with no parking stalls. A lot of them are very awkward in terms of their layouts, and first-time home buyers don't really want to buy these units even at discounted prices, which means that even some speculators that can obtain a mortgage and can sort of complete on these units have no ability to sell these units because they can only be sold to other investors, and other investors at this time are not interested in these type of investment properties. This really highlights the dark side of speculation and how middle-class regular people can fall for the hype and how they have this feeling of missing out and they really want to get in before it's too late. I mean, the story with this Montreal man shows so many mistakes that he has made. I mean, of course, it's easy for me to sit here behind my desk and talk about all the mistakes that this specific buyer has made, but we can learn from other people's experiences. The big red flag, number one, is that this man was from Montreal and he was buying a condo in Toronto. Maybe he knows that market really well, but doesn't sound like he does. And I get this all the time. I have people that come up to me and they want to buy a condo in Calgary. They want to buy a condo in Winnipeg because they heard it's a good investment. They heard it's a cash flow positive property. Well, first of all, I'm not licensed in those markets, so I don't know. But secondly, they themselves don't know. They just heard from a friend of a friend and they think it's a good investment. And it's the same thing with these pre-sale condos. A lot of people were coming up to me and saying, well, I heard from somebody that it's a good deal to buy and then flip. And again, it is not. It's a lot of risk, as this article and the current events are showing. So you have to know the market that you're getting into, especially if you are trying to be an investor slash speculator. The second lesson is not having the ability to complete. This specific buyer could not even obtain a mortgage on this property. He never planned to complete on the unit. That is a huge mistake. And once again, unfortunately, I see a similar situation that has been unfolding over the last few years in Vancouver. A lot of people were buying 2-3 condos in the same building with the intention to assign them without any intent or ability to get a mortgage. That is a huge red flag, of course, because what happens when the market takes a downturn and you have to complete on these properties? Well, what happens is exactly what's happening right now. The other thing that happened, the lesson number 3, is that you have to plan for higher mortgage rates. What wiped out a lot of investors is the fact that the interest rates have gone up. And even though right now they have dropped quite a bit, they're still a lot higher than they were in 2020 and 2021. And some of these investors were using those numbers for their sort of mortgage calculation. They were also using those rent numbers for the rental income. Now, of course, the rents have fallen and the mortgage rates have gone up, which means that their mortgage payments have gone up and a lot of people are underwater and a lot of people cannot even complete on these units. The stress test does alleviate some of that headache because you have to qualify for a higher rate, but still over the last few years, I saw a lot of people sort of hoping for lower rates when it comes time to completion. Fourth lesson is something that I already talked about, this sort of fear of missing out. A lot of middle class people got sucked into this investment black hole. They heard about investors and speculators making tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars on speculating in real estate, and they thought, well, I could do the same thing. I am just as smart as everybody else. But you see, it is not as simple as it seems. And unfortunately, again, right now, a lot of not only these sort of greedy speculators and flippers got caught in this mess, a lot of them did get caught in this mess, but also a lot of middle class regular families that were trying to do it for the first time now are feeling all the pain. The last lesson and the last takeaway that I wanted to highlight in this video is the fact that even when the prices drop significantly, there might not be a buyer for you. Almost every week I get a phone call from somebody who has purchased at the height of the market. Now the completion is coming nearer and they're trying to get rid of the unit. They're even talking about things like, I'll walk away from my deposit, just find me a buyer. And unfortunately, the problem with that is that when the market takes this downturn, nobody else wants your failed investment. The way I see investors react to all of this right now, they're waiting on the sidelines. The last thing I want to say that this is not the situation across all pre-sales across the whole Greater Vancouver. This is specific pockets, specific buildings, specific neighborhoods. So don't be surprised when you see actually a lot of successful pre-sale projects and a lot of people being very happy that they have purchased pre-sale a few years ago. This is not a situation that's just happening across the board at the same rate. Yes, it's not as good as it was, and chances are a lot of pre-sale buyers would probably be regretting their decision to buy at the moment, but some are in a lot worse situation than others. And I'll try to keep you updated on this YouTube channel with any unfolding news in this story and many others. Please subscribe so you don't miss those videos when they come out in the future. If you enjoyed this video and you watched it all the way until this point, please give it a thumbs up. That helps the channel quite a bit. And if you're looking for any real estate advice, you need to buy or sell real estate here in Greater Vancouver, feel free to reach out. My contact information is below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.